Picture this: Amsterdam, 1983. A city known for its picturesque canals, tulips, and beer. But beneath this tranquil exterior lay a sinister plot that would shock the world. In the heart of it all was a man whose name was synonymous with brewing excellence, Freddy Heineken, the beer baron himself. He was about to face a chilling ordeal that would test his wit and resilience. Welcome to Claws and Crime Chronicles, where we dive deep into the dark and enigmatic world of true crime and mysteries. Today, I'll share a tale of high-stakes crime, kidnappings, and the pursuit of an astronomical ransom. Let's dive into the incredible story of the Heineken Kidnapping, an audacious event that made headlines worldwide. So, grab a cold one and get ready to be immersed in the chilling account of the crime. Alfred Henry Heineken was born in Amsterdam on November 4, 1923. The Heist Brewing Company, which served as the forerunner of the family brewery, was established in 1592. In 1864, it was purchased by Alfred's great-grandfather, Gerard Adriaan Heineken, who employed a groundbreaking brewing method that had been created at Pilsen employing a potent yeast from a Louis Pasteur student, the same yeast strain that Heineken uses today. Within 11 years, the flavorful beer had won a global award in Paris. By the end of the 19th century, Heineken was being exported to France and the Dutch East Indies. Heineken became the first foreign beer allowed into America when Prohibition came to an end in 1933. Henry Pierre, Freddy's alcoholic father, managed the business from 1914 to 1940 before selling the family's stakes in 1942. In the meantime, before continuing his studies in America, young Freddy was attending Kennemer Lyceum. He wrote his father a prophetic letter that he would restore the majority of shares in Heineken into the hands of the family. He stated, "It's not my plan to become very rich, but it is a matter of pride that any children I might have can inherit a stake in Heineken, like I did from my father and you inherited from your father." Just before his family's stake was sold, he joined Heineken at the age of 18, starting his career by lugging sacks of barley. Later, when working in the New York sales office, he was greatly fascinated by the advertising on Madison Avenue. He also met the daughter of a Kentucky bourbon distiller, who would become his wife. He succeeded his father as a member of the Brewers' Supervisory Board in 1951, and after borrowing money, secretly bought back a controlling stake in Heineken in 1954. He was officially appointed to the Heineken Executive Board 10 years later, at which point he took charge of the financial side, as well as often taking personal control of the advertising campaigns. He became chairman of the Heineken Holding Company in 1979. Now, fast forward to that fateful day, Wednesday, November 9, 1983, Freddy Heineken was leaving his office building in Amsterdam with two women. About 40 feet away, his driver Abe Dotterer waits for him in an armored Cadillac Fleetwood. When Heineken walked towards the car, he was overpowered by three armed men. The women tried to intervene, but were held off with pepper spray. Abe Dotterer left his car to help his boss, but he didn't stand a chance. Both Heineken and Dotterer were thrown in the back of a van by the three kidnappers. The orange van left with the back doors still open. Now, who were these kidnappers? 2 years before the kidnapping, the four friends Cor van Hout, Willem Holleder, Frans Meyer and Jan Bullard decided they wanted to become rich quickly, and they wanted to kidnap a rich man. During the preparation, it was initially unclear who would be the victim. They had several candidates, including Wis Dekker, CEO of Philips, Albert Heijn Jr., CEO of Ahold, Anton Driesman, director of Verum and Driesman, and Alfred Heineken, major shareholder of Heineken. It took a lot of thinking, effort, and money to prepare. The four buddies contributed 100,000 guilders to cover their expenses. Jan Bullard owned a 140-feet Romney shed in the western harbor area of Amsterdam. They constructed 2 compartments with a hidden door behind a wall. No one could see the compartments from the workshop, which was inside the shed, and no one noticed that the space was suddenly 12 feet smaller than it had been. While Heineken and Dotterer were imprisoned in these cells, people walked in and out of the workplace without detecting anything out of the ordinary. Martin Urkamps was added into the group once the planning process had reached its peak. He played a small part in the abduction. He aided the kidnappers in stealing the vehicles they used to commit the crime. The ransom money transfer was the most complicated part of the kidnapping. They had the bright notion to employ pneumatic tube transportation. In this manner, they could get the cash while maintaining a safe distance. However, a test revealed that this involved numerous dangers and was too challenging to do. Another possibility was to have the negotiators toss the money into the ocean so that the kidnappers could retrieve it using diving gear. The weight of the money was an issue with this procedure. It would be difficult to manage the millions of bills underwater. The weight of the cash presented a challenge for the kidnappers. In order to reduce the likelihood of being discovered later, they didn't want to demand 1,000 Dutch guilders bills. The bags with bills of smaller values would weigh at least 800 pounds total. The kidnappers wished for the police to believe that they were Germans. They purchased the majority of the goods in Germany, including the produced typewriter, a 4 paper with a German watermark, and everything found within the cells. The objective was to kidnap Heineken and his driver Dotterer as soon as they stepped out of Heineken's Noordwijk home 1 week before the actual kidnapping. Because Heineken often skipped the house when the kidnappers were nearby, it was discovered that he had altered his schedule. Their plans needed to be modified. They decided to kidnap them at the Heineken office in Amsterdam. After 2 weeks of observation, the plans and escape route were clear. On the evening of November 9, 1983, the 4 friends got into position and managed to kidnap Freddy Heineken and Abe Dotterer. Heineken and Dotterer were handcuffed in the back of the van. They were forced to put a helmet on with the visor taped so they could not see where they were going. Heineken knew immediately what was going on and offered the men to write a check while they were still in the van. The kidnappers didn't respond to this offer. A taxi driver had seen the struggle in front of the office and followed the van through Amsterdam. They eventually arrived at a bicycle tunnel where the kidnappers had removed the poles earlier. This was where they switched to 2 other cars. The van blocked access for other cars, which bought them extra time. During the transition, Willem Holleder walked with his gun drawn towards the taxi. The taxi driver backed out and fled. The kidnappers continued their way to the western harbor area where the shed with the cells was located. They didn't encounter any police on their way. Heineken and Dotterer got pajamas on and were imprisoned. They took care of the place outside working hours, because the shed was still being used by construction workers. Due to disappointing negotiations, the abduction eventually lasted 3 weeks. Heineken and Dotterer were chained to the wall most of the day. They slept on a mattress on the floor and had a chemical toilet at their disposal. After 4 days, the kidnappers opened the doors of both cells. This was when Heineken found out that not only he, but his driver Dotterer was kidnapped as well. They were allowed to talk to each other a few minutes a day, but the 2 men spent most of the 3 weeks on their own. The kidnappers and the police communicated by letter, coded newspaper ads, or they recorded Heineken or Dotterer on tapes which they used to give instructions by phone. The kidnappers demanded a ransom of 200,000 Dutch, German, French and US banknotes with a total value of 35 million Dutch guilder. The first attempt to transfer the ransom failed. The kidnappers demanded that the car with the ransom was a white van with 2 red crosses and left from a specific location. However, this failed because the van could not leave from that location without the press noticing. The second attempt was on November 28. The kidnappers demanded that the driver of the car with the ransom was alone and not followed. The driver was led to a chain of instructions. The kidnappers had buried these instructions in plastic cups earlier. On the way, the driver was instructed to transfer with the ransom to another car. Eventually, at the top of an overpass, the agent had to stop. Through a radio, he was instructed to slide the money bags down through a drainage channel. The kidnappers stood below the overpass and loaded the ransom into a Mercedes Heineken and drove away. Earlier, in the woods near Heist, they had buried several barrels in the ground. This is where they hid the money. After an anonymous tip, a SWAT team invaded the shed in the harbor area of Amsterdam on November 30th. At first, they thought that they were misled, but when the police found out that there was more behind the wall, they eventually found the secret door. Heineken and Daughter were finally freed after 3 weeks of captivity. According to the police, 3 of the 5 kidnappers were named in the tip. The police never revealed any further information. Jan Bullard and Martin Urkamps were arrested soon after the invasion of the shed. The other 3 kidnappers managed to escape. Frans Meyer spent several weeks in Amsterdam, but turned himself in on December 28. Willem Holleder and Cor van Hout fled to Paris. They stayed in an apartment for several months but were arrested by the French police on February 29, 1984. Since they were placed in one of the toughest prisons in Europe, they wanted to be extradited to the Netherlands as soon as possible. Their lawyers advised not to agree to the extradition. There was no extradition treaty for detention and extortion between France and the Netherlands at that time. The 2 kidnappers could only be extradited based on written death threats. After a long extradition procedure, the Conseil d'État eventually ruled that France could not extradite or judge the 2 men. As they were given a residence permit, they stayed under house arrest in French hotels from December 6, 1985. In February 1986, France wanted to transfer the kidnappers to Guadeloupe. But once on the plane, it turned out that from Guadeloupe they would fly to the Dutch side of St. Martin. The kidnappers refused to fly to St. Martin, which eventually brought them to St. Barthélemy. The population of this island revolted because they didn't want criminals to be transferred to their island. The population got so angry that it wasn't safe for the kidnappers to stay on the island. They were transferred to the French side of St. Martin, but they faced the same problems with the population here. At night, they fled to Tintamarre. Tintamarre is an uninhabited island in the Caribbean and located about 3 kilometers from St. Martin. The next day, they were brought back to Guadeloupe and from there to Évry in France where they stayed in hotels. The Netherlands asked for extradition again. As a result, the French police arrested the 2 kidnappers, which brought them back to the tough French prison. Van Hout and Holleder decided not to resist the extradition any longer. In October 1986, almost 2 years after the abduction, they were extradited to the Netherlands. Martin Urkamps was sentenced to 8 years in prison in October 1984. Jan Bullard was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Van Hout and Holleder were sentenced to 11 years in prison in February 1987. Because the earlier extradition was withdrawn by France, they could not be brought to trial for the indictment written death threats. This resulted in 1 year in prison less than Bullard. The time they had been held in France, and the time that they had house arrest was deducted from their prison sentence. Franz Meyer was given a psychiatric examination. He escaped from the mental hospital on January 1, 1985. Without his presence, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison later that year. In 1994, he was found by crime reporter Peter de Vries in Paraguay. Meyer had started a family here. In 1998, he was arrested in Paraguay and 4 years later extradited to the Netherlands. After his release in 2005, he returned to Paraguay. Now, what about the ransom? Well, when the kidnappers were on the run, they took 15 million Dutch guilders out of the barrels which they had buried in the woods. 3 million each. About a week later, the police found the buried barrels and the rest of the 35 million guilders. During the hunt for the kidnappers, the house searches and arrests, the police confiscated 7 million guilders. 8 million has never been found. The kidnappers told the police that Franz Meyer had burned the money at the beach. However, there have been reports of Thomas van der Biel, who was murdered in 2006, that 7 million was buried in a forest in Paris. According to van der Biel, these millions were used to purchase apartment buildings in Zaandam and brothels in Alkmaar. Though what really happened with the money remains unclear. In the wake of the Heineken kidnapping, one can't help but ponder the intricate web of human psychology. The ruthless pursuit of wealth, the power of resilience, and the audacity of those who dare to challenge the limits of society. As we delve into this enthralling tale, it leaves us with a question: what is the true cost of ambition? The Freddy Heineken kidnapping remains a chilling reminder of the lengths to which some will go for a taste of the high life. The kidnapping of a beer magnate not only took a significant toll on the Heineken family but also irrevocably altered the course of the Netherlands' criminal history. In the end, the story of the Heineken kidnapping serves as a stark testament to the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to bow down in the face of adversity. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history's mysteries. Remember to subscribe, like, and share, and leave a comment as we continue to unearth the enigmatic stories that have shaped our world. Until the next episode, this is Kat from Claws and Crime Chronicles, signing off.